This is a lined and padded laptop sleeve with a zip closure, front pouch for accessories, and no internal bias tape. And was supposed to be my first proper tutorial video, but plans gaff a gley. There is no pattern for this, you just need the length, width and depth of the device you are making the sleeve for. For materials, I'm dipping into my scraps, this purple velour for the lining, batting for the padding, and for the facing, I made this sheet from plastic bags. If you want to make your own plastic bag material, I have an in-depth guide linked in the iCard. First, I lied, there is a pattern, you have to draft it. You can skip this, but it's easy and saves you from having to measure every panel you cut. Add a centimetre of easing and 2 times your usual seam allowance to the length and width of your device. Use those measurements to draw a rectangle. I round the corners with this toy magnifying glass and cut out with craft scissors. Use the pattern to cut 2 panels of the lining, batting and facing. This was where I made the mistake. I needed the full length of this sheet for the side panel, but past me doesn't know that yet. I chose one of the facing panels to use as the front. I'm adding a pouch for the charger. This is optional, so feel free to skip ahead. The lining from an old jacket was used for the pouch. Whatever you use, it needs to have some stretch. Fold the pattern roughly by 1/3 and cut the pouch panel. Add bias tape around the edge. This will strengthen this light fabric where it will be sewn into the seams. Open out the tape, match up the raw edges, and edge sew the tape in place. Fold the tape over the raw edge and stitch closed 3 sides, leaving the edge that marries up with the zip open. Take your zip. I had this one in my sewing box, but it's probably a little too chunky for this application. For aesthetics, I also add bias tape to the top edge of the zip, but only stitch it in place open for now. Fold the tape over the top edge of the pouch and position the top edge of the pouch panel just under the zip track. Then stitch that down. I'm using a twin needle for extra strength. If you have a twin needle and never use it, I have a full guide to that too.
Oh shit.
However, I broke all my twin needles in the process and ended up unpicking and running 2 lines of top stitching by eye. Not recommended. Now fold the tape around the zip, line up the pouch with the facing, and pin the panels together. I secure the zip to the facing, again using 2 lines of top stitching on the bias tape, before stitching around the other 3 sides to tack the pouch in place. Now for the sides. Measure the circumference of your device. Decide how wide you want your zip opening to be. This must be a little wider than your device. This is where I realised that I don't have enough width in the plastic sheet, but I'm going to push ahead pretending there isn't a problem. I cut as much material as possible, matching the width of my zipper. If you're following on at home, you would take your intended zipper length away from your circumference and add 2 times your seam allowance to get the length of your side panel. Once cut, I use the side panel as a template to cut the batting and lining for the sides. Hoping there would be enough material to go around the edge, I choose to use as much of the zipper length as possible. I match up the raw ends of the zip and facing, right sides together and sew in place before folding over and top stitching down. This is done on both ends to make a loop. I think I'm ready to assemble. On the zip assembly, I notch the center point of the zip, its opposite, and both outside panels. Pin the front panel and side together, matching up the notches first. Then the center of the shorter sides, and the crushing reality that this won't work sinks in. Nothing to do but add some material. You can tell I'm frustrated because I use my fabric scissors to cut the loop open. I walk the sides around the edge and mark the ends. Measure this gap and cut a new rectangle of facing. Trimmed to width and sewed it on the same way as I joined the side facing to the zip. To make sure I get the right length this time, I walk the sides around again, pin it in place, and mark the amount of material I need. When I fold the facing over for top stitching, I just make sure that this mark lines up with the cut edge. Anyway, I clean this up and pin it in place, and it is the perfect fit. I sew these together and go round twice with a straight stitch for a bit of extra strength. Then line up the back panel with the right sides facing in and pin it in place. This is again sewn twice with a straight stitch. At the last second I remember I need to add a tab of bias tape to this seam, but forgot that I had wanted to add a second one here. The shell's done and I can make sure my laptop will fit. Success! Let's turn to the lining. I basted the batting to the lining. I'm using vertical lines, but you can do whatever pattern you wish. It just makes the lining easier to work with and holds the padding in place once it's in the sleeve. I notch the center points of the front, back and side lining panels. Align the front and sides right sides together and sew with a straight stitch, and repeat for the back panel. Another quick test fit before I reduce a bit of the bulk in the seam and add a zigzag stitch to secure the raw edges. That bias tab was added to stop the lining from pulling inside out when I take the laptop out the sleeve. So I settle in to hand sew it into the seam of the lining, before hand sewing the lining into the zip with a blind hem stitch. And this is the final item. Overall, it worked out. I have a decent functional laptop sleeve. The fix on the side panel could be called a feature. I wish I could have got a new twin needle, but the haberdashery was all out at the time. However, I am pretty pleased with this lining. No internal bias tape, and the hand stitching looks pretty good once I switch to a matching thread. I'm not going to get invited to the LV Atelier, but it's a start. The finished result is a luxury approach to a laptop sleeve made from the scraps I am lucky enough to have access to. If you do make your own laptop sleeve, let me know how you get on in the comments, and why not join us over on The Unpicker.